The stars had never looked so cold to Admiral Grace Howard as they did that morning. She stood alone on the observation deck of the Earth vessel Resolute, watching the massive alien station grow larger through the thick glass window. It was bigger than anything humans had ever built. The station stretched across the darkness of space like a metal city, covered with lights and towers and docking bays that could hold 1,000 ships. Grace was 53 years old. Her hair had turned gray at the temples, and lines had formed around her eyes from years of hard decisions and sleepless nights. She had commanded ships in 3 different wars. She had watched good people die. She had given orders that saved millions, and orders that cost thousands. None of that had prepared her for what she was about to do. Behind her, the door slid open with a soft hiss. Commander Daniel Park walked in and stood beside her. He was younger than Grace by 15 years, with black hair cut short and a face that rarely showed emotion. He had served under her for 7 years and knew her better than most. "The crew is ready," Daniel said. "Lieutenant Vance has the communication systems prepared. We can transmit to Earth the moment things go wrong." Grace smiled slightly. "You mean if things go wrong?" "I said what I meant, Admiral." She turned to look at him. Daniel had always been honest with her. It was one of the reasons she had chosen him for this mission. The other reason was that he was the best tactical officer in the fleet, and if this meeting turned into a fight, she would need someone who could think fast. "The Valorians have ruled this part of the galaxy for 6,000 years, Grace said. "They have seen dozens of species rise and fall. They have watched civilizations build empires and then crumble to dust. To them, we are children. We are nothing. And yet they summoned us," Daniel replied. "They could have simply attacked our colonies. They could have sent their fleet to destroy our ships. Instead, they want to talk. They want to watch us beg," Grace corrected him. "They want to see humans kneel before their council and ask for mercy. It will be entertainment for them. A story they can tell for the next 1,000 years, about the foolish young species that thought it could challenge the collective." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "And what will we actually do?" Grace turned back to the window. The station was close now. She could see individual ships moving around it. Some, larger than the Resolute. Others, small and fast, like metal insects. Somewhere inside that station, the leaders of a dozen alien civilizations were waiting to hear what humanity had to say. "We will surprise them," Grace said simply. The docking process took almost an hour. The Valorians had designed their station to make visitors feel small. The corridors were tall enough for creatures 3 times the height of humans. The walls were covered with images and symbols from the collective's long history, showing battles won and enemies defeated. Everything was meant to remind visitors that they were in the presence of an ancient and powerful civilization. Grace walked through those corridors with her head held high. Daniel walked on her right side, and Lieutenant Katie Vance walked on her left. Katie was young, only 28, but she was one of the best communications officers in the fleet. She could speak 6 human languages and had learned enough of the Valorian tongue to understand their conversations even without a translator. "They are watching us," Katie said quietly. "Cameras in the walls, sensors in the floor. They are recording everything." "Good," Grace replied. "Let them watch." Representatives from other species lined the corridors, watching the human delegation pass. Grace recognized some of them from intelligence reports. The tall, insect-like creatures were Kethrani, warriors who had once fought the collective and lost badly. The short, rock-skinned beings were Dross, traders and merchants who cared only about profit. There were others too, species Grace had never seen before, all gathered to witness humanity's humiliation. None of them spoke to her. None of them offered greeting or welcome. They simply watched with eyes that held curiosity, contempt, or both. The council chamber was at the center of the station. It was a circular room with a domed ceiling that showed the stars above. Seats rose in tiers around the edges, filled with representatives from every species in the collective's territory. At the far end of the room, On a raised platform sat the High Arbiter. Vethral was his name. Grace had studied everything about him that human intelligence could find. He was over 2,000 years old. Ancient even by Valorian standards. His body was long and thin, with 4 arms and skin that changed color based on his emotions. Right now, that skin was a deep purple, the color of superiority and amusement. He looked down at Grace the way a person might look at an insect that had crawled into their home. "Admiral Grace Howard," Vethral said. His voice was deep and echoed through the chamber. A translator device turned his words into English, but somehow kept the condescending tone. "You have traveled far to stand before this council. Your species is bold, if nothing else." Grace stopped in the center of the chamber floor. Daniel and Katie stopped behind her. She could feel hundreds of eyes watching her from every direction, waiting to see what the human would do. "High Arbiter," Grace said. Her voice was calm and clear. "I thank you for this meeting. Humanity has come to discuss the future of our relationship with the collective." Laughter rippled through the chamber. It came from dozens of throats in dozens of different sounds, but the meaning was the same. They found her words amusing. Vethral raised one of his 4 hands, and the laughter slowly died. "Your colonies have expanded into territories claimed by the collective. Your ships have crossed into space that does not belong to you. You have taken resources that were not yours to take. This council summoned you here to discuss your withdrawal from these areas. There is nothing else to discuss." Grace did not move. She did not look away from Vethral's many eyes. "I understand your position, High Arbiter, but I have not come to announce our withdrawal." The chamber fell silent. Vethral's skin flickered through several colors before settling back to purple. "Then why have you come, Admiral? To waste our time? To play games?" "I have come to present terms," Grace said. "Terms for peaceful coexistence between humanity and the collective." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Vethral made a sound that the translator could not quite capture. Something between a laugh and a bark. The sound spread through the chamber as other representatives joined in. They were laughing at her. Laughing at humanity. Laughing at the idea that this young, small, weak species could offer terms to civilizations that had existed since before humans had learned to make fire. Grace stood perfectly still and let them laugh. She had expected this. She had planned for it. Daniel leaned close to her ear. "They really do not take us seriously." "They will," Grace replied quietly. "Soon." The laughter continued for nearly a full minute. Grace counted the seconds in her head, keeping her face calm and her body still. She had been trained for moments like this. She had faced hostile enemies across negotiation tables and battlefield lines. She knew the value of patience. Vethral finally raised his hand again, and the chamber slowly fell quiet. His skin had shifted to a bright orange color that Grace had learned meant amusement mixed with disbelief. He leaned forward on his platform, all 4 of his arms resting on the stone railing in front of him. "Terms," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "You wish to offer terms to the Galactic Collective, a species that has existed for less than a single rotation of our home world around its star. A species that was still fighting among itself with primitive weapons when our ancestors were building the first ships to travel between stars." He gestured broadly at the assembled representatives. "Tell me, Admiral Howard, do you know how many species have stood where you stand now? Do you know how many young civilizations have believed themselves special? Believed themselves destined for greatness, only to fade into forgotten history?" Grace met his gaze without flinching. "I imagine quite a few. Hundreds," Vethral said. "Perhaps thousands. They came before this council with demands and threats and dreams of glory. Some we absorbed into the collective. Some we destroyed. Most simply, disappeared. Unable to survive in a galaxy that did not care about their ambitions." The Kathrani ambassador shifted in his seat, his mandibles clicking together in what might have been agreement. The Dross representative sat completely still, his rocky face impossible to read. And yet, Grace said, here we are, still standing, still expanding, still building. Vethral's colors flickered with what might have been irritation. A temporary condition, I assure you. Your species has been spacefaring for what, 200 of your years? We have existed for millennia. We have seen your kind before. Aggressive, ambitious, convinced of your own importance. It is almost cute. More laughter from the chamber. Grace waited for it to die down before speaking again. High Arbiter, I did not come here to argue about the relative age of our civilizations. I came here to present a proposal that I believe will benefit both humanity and the collective. May I proceed? Vethral waved one of his hands dismissively. By all means, Admiral, entertain us. Grace activated her datapad and began to read. Her voice was clear and steady, reaching every corner of the chamber. Term 1. The human colonies established in the neutral zones will remain under Earth's jurisdiction. We will not withdraw. We will not abandon the people who have built lives there. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Grace continued, without pause. Term 2. Human merchant vessels will be granted free passage through collective-controlled space. Trade will be open between our peoples, with fair tariffs and mutual respect for commercial law. The murmurs grew louder. Vethral's skin was shifting through colors rapidly now, unable to settle on a single shade. Term 3. Humanity will be granted a seat on this council, with full voting rights on matters that affect the galactic community. We will participate as equals, not as subordinates. Someone in the upper tiers made a sound of outrage. Grace did not look up to see who it was. Term 4. The 347 human prisoners currently being held in collective detention facilities will be released immediately. They were taken during border incidents that should never have happened. They will be returned to their families without conditions. She lowered the datapad and looked directly at Vethral. These are my terms, High Arbiter. These are the conditions under which humanity will agree to peaceful coexistence with the collective. The chamber erupted. Representatives shouted over each other in a dozen different languages. The translators struggled to keep up with the chaos of voices. Grace saw anger on many faces, disbelief on others. Some of the representatives looked at her with what might have been respect, but most looked at her like she had lost her mind. Vethral did not shout. He did not need to. When he raised his hand, the chamber gradually fell silent, though the tension remained thick in the air. Admiral Howard, he said, his voice dangerously soft, you have just made demands that no species in the history of this council has ever dared to make. You speak of equality with civilizations that were ancient when your planet was still cooling from its formation. You speak of voting rights as if your tiny fleet and handful of colonies gave you any standing to participate in decisions that shape the galaxy. He leaned forward, his many eyes fixed on Grace. Are you insane? Are you simply ignorant of reality? Or is this some kind of elaborate joke that humans find amusing? Grace remained calm. I assure you, High Arbiter, I am completely serious. Then you are a fool, Vethral said flatly, and your species is doomed to learn a very painful lesson about its place in the universe. Perhaps, Grace replied, but before you make any decisions, there is something else you should know. Vethral's colors shifted to an annoyed red. Grace took a slow breath. This was the moment. Everything she had planned, everything she had worked for over the past 3 years, came down to the next few words. Those terms I just read, she said. Those were my kind terms. The ones I am offering because I still believe peace between our peoples is possible. The ones I am offering because I respect the history and achievements of the civilizations represented in this chamber. She paused, letting the silence stretch. But I have other terms prepared. Less kind terms. Terms that I will present if you reject the proposal I have just made. For the first time since she had entered the chamber, Vethral seemed uncertain. His colors stopped shifting and settled into a murky brown that Grace did not recognize from any intelligence report. Are you threatening this council, Admiral? Grace shook her head slowly. No, High Arbiter. I am informing this council. There is a difference. The chamber was completely silent now. Every representative watched Grace with new intensity. Something had changed in the air. The amusement was gone, replaced by something else. It was not fear, not yet, but it was close. Daniel stepped forward to stand beside Grace. His face was as calm as hers, but his hand rested near his sidearm. Not a threat, just a reminder that the humans had not come unprepared. You claim to have leverage against the collective? Vethril said slowly. What could your primitive species possibly possess that would give you power over civilizations that have conquered star systems and destroyed fleets beyond counting? Grace smiled slightly. It was not a warm smile. I am glad you asked, High Arbiter, because what I am about to show you will change everything you think you know about humanity. She nodded to Katie Vance. Katie stepped forward and activated a small device she had carried hidden in her uniform. A holographic display flickered to life in the center of the chamber, floating in the air where everyone could see it. It showed a star map. Not just any star map. It showed the Valorian home system, and it showed something else. Something that made Vethral rise from his seat in shock, his skin cycling through colors so fast that the effect was almost painful to watch. That is impossible, he whispered. Grace's smile widened just slightly. Is it? Perhaps you should listen more carefully, High Arbiter, because this conversation is about to become very different. The holographic display hung in the air, like a ghost made of light. Every eye in the chamber was fixed on it. The star map showed the Valorian home system in perfect detail, every planet and moon and orbital station marked with small glowing dots. But that was not what had made Vethril rise from his seat in shock. In the center of the display, moving through the system like a shadow among the stars, was the projected path of a ship, a human ship, a ship that had traveled through the most heavily defended system in collective space without being detected. 3 days ago, Grace said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. A single vessel from Earth's stealth fleet entered your home system. The ship was called the Silent Dawn. It was crewed by 12 people under the command of Lieutenant Commander Ben Torres. She walked slowly toward the holographic display, her footsteps echoing in the quiet chamber. The Silent Dawn passed within scanning range of your primary orbital defense platform here. She pointed to a large station orbiting the third planet. It moved past your military command center here. It circled your capital world twice, mapping every installation, every patrol route, every communication frequency. Vethral's colors had settled into a pale gray that Grace recognized as fear. Your detection systems, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Your sensors are the most advanced in the galaxy. No ship has ever approached our home world without being seen. Not in 6,000 years. That was true, Grace agreed. Until 3 days ago. She nodded to Katie, who changed the display. The star map disappeared, replaced by detailed images of Valorian installations, defense platforms, weapons arrays, shield generators, every critical piece of military infrastructure in the system captured in perfect clarity. The Silent Dawn remained in your system for 47 hours, Grace continued. It gathered data on everything we could find. Your fleet positions, your communication codes, the deployment schedules of your patrol vessels. When the ship finally departed, your sensors never registered its presence. Not once. The chamber had changed completely. The representatives, who had been laughing minutes ago, now sat in stunned silence. The Kethrani ambassador had risen halfway from his seat, his mandibles clicking in what Grace assumed was alarm. Even the stone-faced Dross representative had shifted position, his small eyes moving between the display and Grace. This is impossible, Vethral repeated, but there was no conviction in his voice. This must be a fabrication. Sensor data can be falsified. Images can be created. Grace had expected this response. She nodded to Katie once more. "We anticipated that you would doubt our evidence," Grace said. "So we brought proof that cannot be falsified." The display changed again. This time, it showed an object that made Vethril stumble backward, as if he had been struck. It was a crystal rod about the length of a human forearm, covered in intricate carvings and glowing with a soft inner light. Grace had spent 3 weeks learning about Valorian culture specifically, so she would understand the significance of what she was showing. "The Staff of First Light," she said, "given to the High Arbiter of the Collective by the Founding Council 6,000 years ago, passed down through generations as a symbol of authority and legitimacy. According to your own records, it has never left the High Arbiter's personal residence." She paused. "Until 3 days ago." Vethril's hands were shaking. "All 4 of them." "How?" he demanded. "How is this possible?" "Lieutenant Commander Torres is quite skilled at his job," Grace replied calmly. "He needed proof that could not be dismissed as fabrication. The staff seemed like an appropriate choice. We will return it, of course. Consider it a gesture of goodwill." The chamber exploded into chaos. Representatives shouted at each other, at their aides, at the Valorian guards who stood helpless at the edges of the room. The Kethrani ambassador was speaking rapidly into a communication device. The Dross representative had pulled out a datapad and was typing furiously, probably calculating the economic implications of what he had just witnessed. Vethril raised all 4 of his hands, demanding silence. It took longer this time for the chamber to quiet down. "Admiral Howard," he said. And there was something new in his voice now, something that sounded almost like respect. "You have proven that your species possesses technology we did not anticipate. But one stealth ship does not change the fundamental balance of power. We have fleets that number in the thousands. We have weapons that can crack planets. What does your demonstration truly prove, other than that humans are skilled at sneaking around?" Grace had been waiting for this question. "High Arbiter, I did not send the Silent Dawn to threaten you. I sent it to show you what we chose not to do." She walked back to the center of the chamber floor, where Daniel and Katie waited. "That ship was in your home system for almost 2 full days. It was within striking distance of your capital world, your defense command, your communication arrays. Ben Torres could have done terrible things during those 47 hours. He could have planted explosives. He could have disrupted your power grid. He could have assassinated officials or destroyed critical infrastructure." She met Vethril's eyes directly. "He did none of those things. Because I ordered him not to. Because humanity does not want war with the collective. We want partnership. We want trade. We want to work together as equals. And if we refuse?" Vethril asked. "Then you should know that the Silent Dawn is not our only stealth vessel. We have an entire fleet of ships like her. Ships that can go anywhere, undetected, and do whatever needs to be done." Grace let that sink in before continuing. "We developed this technology in secret over the past 18 years. We knew that someday we would need leverage against civilizations older and more powerful than ourselves. We knew that size alone would not be enough. So we built something different, something that your detection systems cannot see, your weapons cannot target, and your defenses cannot stop." The Dross ambassador spoke for the first time, his voice like stones grinding together. "You expect us to believe that a species barely 2 centuries old has developed technology superior to civilizations that have existed for millennia?" Grace turned to face him. "I do not expect you to believe anything, Ambassador. I expect you to verify. Send your scientists to examine the data we have provided. Send your intelligence services to investigate. You will find that everything I have said is true." She looked around the chamber at all the faces watching her. "Humanity is young, yes. We have existed for only a fraction of the time that your civilizations have ruled the stars. But we have learned things that older species have forgotten. We have fought for every inch of progress we have ever made. We do not have the luxury of patience that comes with immortality. We cannot wait thousands of years for technology to develop naturally. We must create it ourselves. faster than anyone thinks possible. Rating, Nauner. Rating 7. We have. She paused. That is what humanity is. That is what you are dealing with. And if you do not accept our kind terms, you will learn exactly how far we are willing to go to ensure our survival. Vethral sat back down slowly. His colors had shifted again, this time to a deep blue that Grace could not interpret. He was silent for a long moment, his many eyes studying her with new intensity. You speak of survival, he said finally, as if your species faces some threat beyond this council. Grace nodded. We all do, High Arbiter. But that is a conversation for another time. Right now, the only question that matters is this. Will you accept our terms, or will we need to have a very different kind of discussion? The silence that followed Grace's question stretched on for what felt like hours. Vethral sat motionless on his raised platform, his colors shifting slowly through shades of blue and gray that Grace could not read. Around the chamber, representatives whispered to each other in languages the translator could not capture. Some looked angry. Some looked frightened. A few looked thoughtful. It was the Kathrani ambassador who broke the silence. He rose from his seat, his tall insect-like body unfolding to its full height. His name was Cheth Vor, and according to intelligence reports, he had led armies against the collective in his youth before his people had been forced to surrender. High Arbiter, Cheth Vor said, his mandibles clicking rapidly. Before this council makes any decisions, I would ask the human admiral a question. Vethral waved one of his hands in permission. Speak. Cheth Vor turned to face Grace. His compound eyes reflected the light of the holographic display in 1,000 tiny mirrors. Admiral Howard, the technology you have described, these stealth ships that can move unseen through any system. How did your species develop such things in only 18 years? The collective has spent centuries trying to improve their detection systems. We Kathrani spent generations working on cloaking technology before we were conquered. What makes humans different? Grace considered the question carefully before answering. This was important. This was the moment when she could either win allies or create more enemies. Ambassador Cheth Vor, she said, you asked what makes humans different. I will tell you. She began to walk slowly around the chamber floor, speaking to everyone present, not just the Kathrani ambassador. Humanity has existed for about 300,000 years on our home planet. For most of that time, we were nothing special. We hunted animals with simple tools. We lived in caves and feared the darkness. We died young from diseases we did not understand and predators we could not escape. She paused near the dross section of the chamber. But somewhere along the way, something changed. We learned to ask questions. Why does the sun rise? What makes fire burn? How can we cross the water to the land beyond? And when we asked those questions, we did not accept that the answers were unknowable. We searched until we found them. She continued walking. We built cities. We created machines. We learned to fly, first through our own atmosphere and then beyond it. Every generation pushed harder than the last. Every discovery led to 10 more questions. We could not stop ourselves from wanting to know more, to do more, to become more. She stopped in front of Vethral's platform and looked up at him. Your civilizations are ancient and powerful. You have achieved things that humans are only beginning to imagine. But you have also become comfortable. You have been at the top of the galactic order for so long that you have forgotten what it feels like to struggle. To fight for every inch of progress. To know that if you do not succeed, your people will die. Vethral's colors shifted to an angry red. You presume to lecture us about struggle? We have fought wars that lasted longer than your entire civilization has existed. I am not lecturing, Grace replied calmly. I am explaining. You asked how we developed stealth technology that surpasses anything in the galaxy. The answer is simple. We had no choice. She turned to address the full council again. 23 years ago, When our first colony ships ventured beyond our own solar system, we encountered a collective patrol. That patrol destroyed one of our ships without warning and captured another. 312 humans died in less than 2 minutes. The survivors were taken prisoner. Most of them are still in your detention facilities. The chamber was completely silent. That day, humanity learned an important lesson. We learned that the galaxy was not empty. We learned that ancient civilizations controlled the stars. And we learned that those civilizations did not see us as equals. They saw us as insects, to be crushed or ignored. Grace's voice grew harder. We could have given up. We could have retreated to our own system and hoped that no one would bother us. Some of our leaders wanted exactly that. But we did not. Instead, we looked at the technology that had destroyed our ship and asked ourselves a question. How do we beat it? If we won. She smiled slightly, but there was no warmth in the expression. Your detection systems work by scanning for specific energy signatures. Heat from engines, radiation from power cores, the electromagnetic signals of communication systems. So we built ships that produce none of those things. Ships that absorb heat instead of radiating it. Ships powered by energy sources that emit nothing your sensors can detect. Ships that communicate through methods you have never imagined. Ships. Oh, the Dross ambassador leaned forward. Such technology would be immensely valuable. Why would your species share this information with us? I am not sharing the technology, Grace said. I am explaining how it came to exist. Humanity developed these things because we were afraid, because we knew that if we did not find an advantage, we would be destroyed. Fear is a powerful motivator, Ambassador. It makes species do incredible things. She walked back to stand with Daniel and Patie. That is what makes humans different. We are not content to accept the universe as it is. We change it. We adapt. We overcome. It is not a choice for us. It is simply who we are. Chethvor made a sound that the translator rendered as thoughtful agreement. My people were warriors once. We understood that kind of drive. We lost it after our defeat. You do not need to lose it, Grace said. No species does. But comfort and safety have a way of dulling the edge that makes civilizations great. Vethral had been silent through this exchange. Now he spoke. His voice quieter than before. Admiral Howard, let us suppose, for the moment, that everything you have said is true. That your species possesses technology we cannot counter. That your stealth ships can strike anywhere without warning. What do you actually want? Grace met his eyes. I told you at the beginning of this meeting. I want peace. I want trade. I want humanity to have a seat at this council, so that we can participate in decisions that affect our future. I want our prisoners returned. And if we give you these things, Vethral said slowly, what does humanity offer in return? This was the question Grace had been waiting for. She reached into her uniform and pulled out a small data crystal. This contains a partial schematic for our stealth technology. Not enough to replicate it, but enough for your scientists to understand that it is real. It also contains detailed intelligence on the energy signatures and patrol patterns of the Vorteth swarm. The effect of that name was immediate. Representatives who had been calm suddenly sat up in alarm. The Vorteth swarm was something that even the collective feared, a species of pure predators from the galactic rim, slowly expanding toward inhabited space. You have encountered the swarm? Vethral asked, his colors cycling rapidly. Our stealth ships have observed them for the past 6 years, Grace said. They are closer than you think. And they are coming. She held up the data crystal. This is what humanity offers. Knowledge. Technology. Alliance against a threat that will not care about ancient rivalries or territorial disputes. The swarm will consume everything in its path, unless the civilizations of this council work together to stop it. Grace placed the crystal on the floor in front of her. You have a choice, High Arbiter. You can reject our terms and try to destroy us. Maybe you will succeed. Maybe you will not. But either way, you will be weaker when the swarm arrives. Or you can accept our terms and gain allies who know how to fight against impossible odds. She stepped back. That is my final offer. I suggest you consider it carefully. The data crystal sat on the chamber floor like a small star, catching the light from above. No one moved to pick it up, no one spoke. The mention of the Vorteth swarm had changed something in the room. Where there had been arrogance and dismissal, there was now uncertainty. Fear, even. Vethral finally broke the silence. His voice was different now, stripped of the condescension that had colored his earlier words. You claim to have observed the swarm. What have you seen? Grace nodded to Daniel, who stepped forward. Permission to present our findings? High Arbiter? Vethral waved his hand in agreement. Speak. Daniel activated his own datapad. And the holographic display changed once more. This time it showed images that made several representatives gasp or make sounds of distress. The Vorteth swarm has consumed 3 systems in the Outer Rim over the past decade, Daniel said. His voice was flat and professional, but Grace could hear the tension underneath. He had seen these images before. They still disturbed him. The display showed a planet covered in green vegetation and blue water. Then it showed the same planet being surrounded by dark shapes too numerous to count. Finally, it showed what remained. A dead rock stripped of all life, all water, all resources. They do not negotiate, Daniel continued. They do not communicate. They simply consume. Their fleet numbers in the millions. Their biological technology allows them to reproduce faster than any species we have encountered. They have no apparent leadership structure that we can identify. They are driven purely by the need to expand and feed. He changed the display to show a map of the galaxy with the swarm's territory marked in red. The red area was growing visibly, frame by frame, as the map showed their expansion over time. At their current rate of growth, they will reach collective space in approximately 40 years, Kathrani territory in 35. Earth's outer colonies in 28. The chamber erupted into worried conversation. Grace let it continue for a moment before raising her hand. We have been studying the swarm because we knew that someday they would be a threat to everyone, not just humanity, not just the collective, everyone. That is why we developed our stealth technology in secret. That is why we built ships that could observe without being detected. We needed to understand our enemy before the war even started. Chethvor rose again, his mandibles clicking rapidly. Admiral Howard, my people remember what it is like to face an enemy that cannot be reasoned with. The collective defeated us through superior numbers and firepower. But the swarm is something else entirely. Thank you for watching. And that exputed. And quoting the 7. How can anyone fight a force that has no commanders to kill, no capitals to capture, no morale to break? Grace turned to face him directly. By adapting, by innovating, by doing what humanity has always done when faced with extinction. We find a way. She walked toward the center of the chamber again, her footsteps echoing in the tense silence. The data crystal I have offered contains everything we know about the swarm. Their weaknesses, their patterns, the vulnerabilities our scientists believe might be exploited. It is not enough to win a war by itself, but it is a starting point. She looked around at the assembled representatives. None of us can defeat the swarm alone. The collective cannot. The Kathrani cannot. Humanity certainly cannot. But together, we might have a chance. Vethral had not moved from his seat. His colors had finally settled into a steady blue. The color of deep thought. You come to us with threats and demands, and then you offer alliance against a common enemy. This is a complicated strategy, Admiral. It is an honest one, Grace replied. I showed you our capabilities because you needed to understand that humanity is not helpless. I spoke of other terms, less kind terms, because you needed to know that we have options if peace fails. But none of that changes what I actually want. She took a step closer to Vethral's platform. I want to build something. A real alliance, not between masters and servants, but between equals. I want human scientists working alongside Valorian researchers. I want Kathrani warriors training with human soldiers. I want Dross merchants trading freely in our markets, while our traders learn from their experience. Her voice softened slightly. Hi, Arbiter. You laughed at my demands when I first presented them. You called humanity foolish and delusional. You thought we were just another young species that would crumble before your ancient power. She smiled, but this time there was warmth in it. I do not blame you for thinking that. We would have thought the same thing in your position. But now, you know the truth. Humanity is not what you expected. And perhaps that is exactly what this galaxy needs right now. Vethral was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he rose from his seat and descended from his platform. It was the first time Grace had seen him move from that position. He walked toward her until they stood face to face, the tall alien and the human admiral. You speak of being kind, he said. You said that your original terms were you being kind. What did you mean by that? Grace looked up at him without flinching. I meant that I could have approached this very differently. I could have sent our stealth ships to demonstrate their capabilities in a more dramatic way. Destroyed installations, disrupted communications, created chaos in your systems, until you had no choice but to listen. She shook her head. But that is not what humanity wants. We do not want to rule through fear. We do not want to conquer. We want partners, allies, friends. If such a thing is possible between species so different. She extended her hand in the human gesture of agreement. The same gesture she had learned meant something similar in Valorian culture. That was me being kind, High Arbiter. Offering partnership before conflict. Peace before war. I hope you can see that kindness for what it truly is. Vethral stared at her hand for a long moment. The chamber was completely silent. Every representative watched, knowing that this moment would shape the future of the galaxy. Then, slowly, one of Vethral's 4 hands reached out and grasped Grace's. His grip was firm, but not aggressive. His colors shifted to a warm green that Grace had never seen before. The council will need to deliberate, he said. There are procedures, traditions. Many of my colleagues will resist any change to the established order. He paused. But I believe that you are right, Admiral Howard. The old ways will not save us from what is coming. Perhaps it is time for new alliances, new partnerships. Grace squeezed his hand briefly before releasing it. Take whatever time you need, High Arbiter. Humanity is not going anywhere. As she turned to leave with Daniel and Katie, Chethvor called out from his seat. Admiral Howard. One more question. Grace stopped and looked back at him. If the Council accepts your terms, if we form this alliance you speak of, what happens then? Grace smiled. It was a genuine smile this time, full of hope and determination. Then, we get to work. We share knowledge. We train together. We build fleets and develop strategies and prepare for the storm that is coming. She looked around the chamber one last time, meeting the eyes of representatives from a dozen different species. And when the Vorteth swarm finally arrives at our doorstep, they will not find easy prey. They will find a galaxy united. They will find species that have learned to set aside their differences and fight together. They will find humanity standing shoulder to shoulder with the Collective and the Kathrani and all the other civilizations of this council. Her voice grew stronger. They will find us ready, and they will learn what every enemy of humanity has learned throughout our history. She turned and walked toward the exit, her words echoing through the chamber. We do not give up. We do not surrender. And we never, ever stop fighting for our survival. The doors of the council chamber closed behind her. But Grace knew that something had begun in that room. Something that would change the galaxy forever. Behind her, she heard Vethral's voice calling the council to order, beginning the deliberations that would determine humanity's future among the stars. Grace smiled as she walked back toward her ship. It was going to be a long road ahead. But for the first time, since she had received this assignment, she felt real hope. Humanity had come to the stars looking for a place to belong. Today, they had taken the first step toward earning it.